Okay, Minister, just turning our attention finally to the last performance outcome area, which was in the area of accountability and transparency. There is quite a lot in this particular performance outcome area. There are 4 dedicated indicators that we look at in multiple dimensions. I want to talk firstly around the first indicator, which is the extent of external oversight on the tax administration. In this POA, across the board, we found probably a good mix of scores, some strengths, some weaknesses. So I'll talk a little bit about both in our summary here today. With respect to the first indicator, there were 2 dimensions that we looked at. Certainly there is good strength around the extent of external oversight that is the tax administration is subject to. So that's very good and very positive. Where we became a little concerned around weaknesses was the investigation process for suspected wrongdoing and maladministration. This particular dimension catches some people up, and that's why we invested quite a bit in the glossary of terms that we use to differentiate between what we consider to be suspected wrongdoing and maladministration. And it is in the area of maladministration where there is no area for complaints in that particular area, and we see that as a particular weakness. So that's probably one that we would invite some comments on. Sorry.
Sorry.
You can just cut it there. No, that's okay. That's fine. Was that what you were thinking about?
Yeah. Exactly.
Okay, I'm not going to read the definition,
read it,
but I just wanted to kind of clarify that. So that's the first indicator that we spoke about.
Now, would you want to finish all the indicators? Then the Minister can come in with his comments.
Yep, sure.
So
I'll go through the next one there.
Which is member.
Yep, which is the level of internal controls. Minister, the second indicator that we look at is the level of internal controls, and as we all know and appreciate, tax administrations rely a lot on the internal controls that are embedded in their business processes and procedures to add to that accountability and transparency. This area, we did identify some weaknesses, mainly around the adequacy of those controls and the level of assurance that's provided by the internal audit area that reports directly to the Director General. My colleague Mambo may wish to add some of the evidence that we looked at in this area.
Thank you, Paul. For this area, we looked at 3 dimensions. And the first one, we were looking at the adequacy of the internal controls you have. And what we found is that you have a lot of operating manual that exists in your various business units and among your members of staff. But when we went into the field, one of the things we discovered is that although you have these standard operating manuals, the members of staff do not adhere to the operating manual. So the operational practice is quite different on the ground. So that's one of the weaknesses we discovered. But in terms of, there are other areas where you are doing quite well. For example, you've got instruments of delegation in terms of the discretionary decisions which your managers can make. And then we saw that in the system, those discretions are embedded, but the challenge is that, and from what your members of staff were saying, is that those controls which are built in the system are not documented. So if you've got a new member of staff coming on board today, I think it will be prudent for the tax administration to have these controls documented so that they can easily find their feet. Then in terms of the assurance on the effectiveness, which your internal audit does provide, yes, there's some level of effectiveness there, but what we found out is that your internal audit has challenges in terms of staffing. You only have 2 members of staff. So as a result, when we look at your annual audit plan, you have set the goals of the number of audits you must cover, but because of the staffing challenges, you are not able to cover all the planned audits. And secondly, you have a challenge in the area of ICT audits. You've got no trained members of staff in that area. So those are some of the things which are bringing in challenges. Then when we look at the level of assurance in terms of staff integrity, yes, you are doing something there. You have the ethics and integrity unit within the internal audit. It does investigate complaints relating to wrongdoing by members of staff. You even have dedicated staff who look at the returns submitted by your members of staff. Yes, there are a lot of things happening. Then we also looked at the code of conduct, which you have. This code of conduct has not been revised in the last 4 years, and it does not take into account the current operating practices in the disciplinary cases. So what we expect is that, yes, you have these manuals or procedures, the code of conduct, but they must be revised from time to time so that you take into account the current happenings in your environment. So that's one reason why we ended up giving you a C+.
Okay. Well, one of the pillars of our government program has been the transparency. So we will make every effort to improve these indicators. You raised a lot of issues here. So let me see my notes. Sorry. First, we will address the lack of national ombudsman office in our country. We put a law regarding this issue. And the second issue that you raised, the new system will have all the procedures documented, including the internal controls procedures. Of course, we will increase the internal affairs unit budget for the next year. And we received the message about our annual plans, and we will address this issue. Maybe you could talk about this?
Yeah, Mr. There is something very difficult here because of the staffing of internal units. As you know, it's kind of difficult to appoint someone in that unit because usually they don't want to go there. So this is something that we should work about in the next few years, and hopefully we can reach our target on our audit plan.
These are all very pleasing to hear. I'm sure that with that focus and concentrated effort and the right people in those particular roles, I think we will see some improvement in this particular performance outcome area, certainly. I just wanted to also talk a little bit about two other indicators that came into this area. One was around the public perception of integrity, and there was quite sound performance there. I think your last taxpayer survey in 2011 was quite positive, so that was very pleasing to see. Always a difficult audience, the public, the taxpaying public, but good to see. Lastly, the last indicator that we looked at was the publication of activities, results and plans. I think the only area where we identified a weakness in this area was around the extent to which there is publication of the tax administration's future directions and plans. What we're talking about here with international good practice around accountability and transparency is not only does the tax administration report on the achievements and the results that it has achieved in the past, but basically broadcast what it intends to do in the future. And that adds to the transparency of the administration itself. So this, for your consideration, is something that you should look at doing. But as I said, there's quite a lot in this performance outcome area around accountability and transparency. Of course, we invite your comments more formally, but if you have any initial comments now, we'd be more than happy to take them on board.
Yes, so with your permission, what you're saying in this indicator P926 is that we should broadcast to everybody what we are going to do. Wouldn't that allow some taxpayers to plan for some kind of misdemeanor, knowing that this is where the tax administration is going to look? I find that a little bit difficult to take in, but if you could explain a little bit further, it would be very helpful.
We're looking at, we're not telling them in intimate detail. Broad statements around focus in particular industry segments, geographic areas, that type of thing. What are the risks? I mean, people want to know what the risks are to the tax system. So it's identifying what those risks are, broadcasting that the tax administration, through its risk assessment process and ensuring the accuracy of returns, has a particular focus on particular risks. So these are the type of things that you look at. So it's not just the fact that you kind of announce that, okay, this is a risk and this is what we're going to do about it, but you follow that through with a robust risk assessment process and then a robust compliance program, including your audit program that targets those particular risks. So it's being transparent in the activities of the tax administration in a broad sense.
Again, with your permission, Minister, is the Director General comfortable with the resource allocation in this particular area? Because you may broadcast that you're going to do A, B, C, D, and you end up, short of what. And when the taxpayer knows that, they promised to do this and they didn't do it, they will never do it, and that may lead to non-compliance at the end of the day.
Yeah, I know this will be kind of difficult for us anyway, because as I said previously, it's good to look at the environment. You don't know our taxpayers very well. We know them, and we know what they want, what they need. So sometimes it's difficult to tell them some things that we plan to do, because it will come back to us and hurt us probably. So sometimes we need to be cautious about what we broadcast.
I guess if we're looking at international good practice, from a tax policy perspective and operational perspective, Mr. Minister and Director General, we may have to consider a budget, to address some of these weaknesses that have been identified, and minimal exposure of the activities of the tax administration will probably be good. And then we can monitor the impact of that. So that would be my take from my tax policy perspective.
Perfect. Okay. Well, thank you for your candid assessment. I really appreciate all your comments. And I wonder what is the next step of this?
Well, firstly, Minister, thank you for your time this morning to discuss the outcomes of our report. Thank you also to the Director General, and we've welcomed the discussion and the issues that we've spoken about this morning. The report remains draft, and we await your comments. We'd appreciate those within 21 days from today, because that allows us to finalise the report within 45 days from today as well, so that you have your finalised performance assessment report back to you at that stage. So on behalf of the assessment team, I'd like to thank you and again the Director General for your time and staff, and we look forward to any comments that you do have.
Perfect.
Thank you.
Justin will be in charge of this.
I'll be following up diligently.
I'm sure you will be.